One of the more horrible examples of inverted or upside down thinking, and history is full of horrible examples of this, is the fact that the Nazis spelt their appalling error, the final solution, with capital letters. I shed many tears over this, but it is by no means the only time I said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And that was a quote from the original transcript of A Course in Miracles.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home.
Hello and welcome to Understanding A Course in Miracles. So, this is the next video in our Miracles in Life series. And in the first video, we had looked at the story of Michael Kent, a neo-Nazi who basically hated anybody that wasn't white. But his whole perception of life was totally transformed through his connection with his probation officer. And he went from living a life of hate and violence to being completely changed as a human being. And I think he even met a family member of Martin Luther King recently. And the catalyst for this miraculous transformation was his friendship with his probation officer, Tiffany, who, in treating him without judgment, enabled him to totally transform his life. So in this video, we're going to look at a story which is related to, I suppose I could call them the original Nazis. This is the famous story of Nicholas Winton and how he rescued hundreds of Czech children from the Nazis just before the Second World War began. And once again, just as with Michael Kent's story, we're going to look at Nicholas Winton's story through the themes of A Course in Miracles. And the teaching from A Course in Miracles that I'd like us to reflect upon and keep in mind as we listen to this story is: a miracle is never lost. It touches many people you may not even know, and sometimes produces undreamed of changes in forces of which you are not even aware. This is not your concern. The miracle will also always bless you.
I never thought what I did 70 years ago was going to have such a big impact as apparently it has. And if it has now got a story which helps people to live for the future, well, that will be an added bonus.
We were 7-year-old children in second grade. And one day, a girl comes up to me and slaps me on the face left and right and left and right, and she said, "My father told me to do that." So I was stunned, I was flabbergasted. How can she do that?
I was only about 4 or 5 years old, but I hit my head on a central heating radiator and I cut my head open. And I remember my father taking me to the doctor, and the doctor looked at it and he said, that does need stitching, but I don't stitch Jews.
The Course says in Chapter 4 that the ego is in such a fearful state that it can only turn to other egos and unite with them in a feeble attempt at identification, or attack them in an equally feeble show of strength. And for human beings, it seems that it's never too soon for us to start teaching our children how to hate. We're often programmed from an early age to see people of different creeds or skin tones or political persuasions as other, as the enemy. A Course in Miracles teaches that the separation between self and other is the weapon of the ego. Nicholas Winton was a 29-year-old stockbroker. The year was 1938. He was off on a skiing holiday to Switzerland when he got a phone call from a friend, the friend that he was in fact going to go on the skiing trip with, whose name was Martin Blake. Martin was in Czechoslovakia, and he told Nicholas that he wasn't going to come on the ski trip after all because he was helping Czechs who were in trouble with the Germans. And so Nicholas decided to join him, and when he got there, Nicholas went around the camps where the people who were in danger were living and saw what he himself described as terrible conditions. He learned from a document which was brought to his attention that Hitler was planning to take over the whole of Europe, a fact which was disbelieved by the British government at the time. Czech families came to him for help, and he thought, well, at least I ought to try and help the children. He said, I have a motto: if something isn't blatantly impossible, there must be a way of doing it. As A Course in Miracles says, there is no order of difficulty in miracles.
So he started writing letters here, there, and everywhere, asking for help. And he had no hesitation about going right to the top, writing to the White House, to President Franklin Roosevelt. A few weeks later, he got a reply. Not from the White House, though, but from much lower down on the diplomatic food chain, from this building here in London, right behind me, the American Embassy. And the reply said, the United States government is unable to permit immigration in excess of that provided for by existing laws.
Nicholas met and started dating a glamorous young lady called Kirsten, who said she was working for the Swedish Red Cross in Prague, but she was actually working undercover as a Nazi spy. I don't know what the young lady actually looked like. This is just a wild guess. She'd been set to trap him by suspicious Nazis who suspected that he was up to something, but in a weird about turn, Kirsten ended up helping Nicholas instead. This was his first miracle. Somehow he managed to persuade Kirsten to take 25 children to safety to Sweden. She didn't return, and he never saw her again. Sometime later, Hitler himself then came to Czechoslovakia, and the danger for the Jews in Czechoslovakia increased.
This was the day the Germans occupied Prague. There was convoys approaching. Germans with motorcycles in front, with sidecars, and behind them there were the big trucks, open trucks, with soldiers seated in two rows. The people on the street were screaming at them. Women were crying.
Finally, a very large Mercedes drove past. Hitler standing there with his arm raised, with three officers sitting behind. It was so quiet, it was like if you could hear a pin drop.
A Course in Miracles says, peace is the ego's greatest enemy because, according to its interpretation of reality, war is the guarantee of the ego's survival. The ego becomes strong in strife. If you believe there is strife, you will react viciously because the idea of danger has entered your mind. The Course continues by saying the idea of danger itself is an appeal to the ego. Peace and eternity are as closely related as are time and war. The ego is the symbol of the separation, just as the Holy Spirit is the symbol of peace. Separation is merely another term for a split mind. What you perceive in others, you are strengthening in yourself. In the 1930s, there was a lot of speculation about whether or not Hitler himself had Jewish ancestry, to the point that Hitler even is said to have had a lawyer investigate his genealogy to disprove this rumour. This rumour resurfaced again at the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, when a Russian minister claimed that Hitler, like President Zelensky of Ukraine, was Jewish, in order to promote some kind of false narrative or false connection or false parallel between Hitler and President Zelensky. And of course, this provoked a lot of outrage, upset, and offence. But this rumour about Hitler's background had been around for a long time before that, and Hitler himself was well aware that people were speculating about whether or not he was Jewish, which seems to have been some kind of secret fear of his, and which no doubt would have fueled his hatred of Jewish people even more. So as the Course says in chapter 11, can you perceive unworthiness in a brother and not perceive it in yourself? We can't escape the results of our own judgments and prejudices because everyone is connected. So when we judge or prejudge others, we experience the effects in our subconscious mind, and we feel as if we ourselves are being judged, and then in a vicious circle we continue to project that resulting self-hatred onto others and look for further ways to attack and condemn them.
Winton wrote all over looking for countries to take in his children. Only one responded positively, his own country, Britain. The rest of the world closed its eyes, its ears, its hearts, and its gates. Winton started his work in London from scratch. There was no organization, no existing pipeline, and he was convinced that time was running out, that war was about to come. From this house on Hampstead Heath, Winton conducted his campaign to get the Germans to let the children out, the British Home Office to let them in, to find British families to take them into their homes, and to raise the money to make it all possible.
One of the chief problems was people said that the English government would never allow children in on their own without their parents. I asked the Home Office and they said yes. And they gave me certain conditions which were difficult. I had to find a family which would look after the child until the emergency was over, and each child had to have a guarantor of £50. It was a hell of a lot of money. When I say the committee in London, it was me and a secretary working from home. I mean, we had no office. We weren't an official body at all. So all I had to do was to buy some notepaper and print British Committee of Refugees from Czechoslovakia, Children's Section. We received the pictures of the children from Prague with details of each child. We enlisted these pictures in the local press, the national press, in Picture Post, which was a journal which helped us enormously.
What made Winton so effective was that in addition to his skills as a salesman, he also had a creative spark and a willingness to experiment.
And we put 6 or 8 of these children together on one card, merely to speed up the process of getting the British families to choose. If somebody said we'd like to take a child, we just said, with what sex? And then we said, what age? We gave them pictures of half a dozen children. And then we asked them to choose a child, which was rather a commercial way of dealing with it. But it was quick and effective, and it worked. And in most cases, it went right.
We were sitting round a little table, you know, having supper. But Mother wasn't eating, and suddenly she put her knife and fork down and looked at Father and said very quietly, I heard today that both Eva and Vera can go to England. And my father looked up and there were tears in his eyes, and as he said, we'll have to let them go.
Liverpool Street Station saw the arrival of another group of refugee children. Another piteous cargo thrown overboard by the ruthless code of the modern European temper. A special effort is being made to help the refugees on Mother's Day.
Then the train arrived and you had up to 200, 250 children getting out, and you had to get the right child to the right family. And you had to treat it as a business. When you got the right child to the right family, the family had to sign for the child so that you had some proof of delivery.
They assembled us kids in a corner. There were a bunch of grown-ups waiting behind a barrier, craning their necks, waiting to pick us up. A lady behind a wooden table called my name, Ben Abeles. A lady my mother's age came over, embraced me, and kissed me.
Waiting for somebody to pick us up. Nobody picked us up. It was late at night, and a taxi driver came over and asked us, "Have you been here since 7 o'clock in the morning? Are you hungry?" And he drove us not far away from the station to a fish and chip shop. Later, he took us to his own wife and small child in a single bedroom apartment in which he put us up, the five of us. English people as a people are extremely kind, and I would say the poorer they were, the kinder they were.
Our greatest regret was that our biggest transport, which was 250 children, which was due to leave at the beginning of September, was cancelled because war started. Nothing that happened prior to the war starting was really of any importance anymore. What was done, what couldn't be done, what had been done was done. Once you can't stop a war, and there is a war, you, I suppose, go to the defense of your country, and I joined the RAF.
When you're young, you take everything in life, including survival, for granted. As I grew older, though, I began to wonder more and more how it was that when so many died, our parents, friends, families, and millions of others, how it came to be that we fortunate few on those trains from Prague were spared. That is, until 50 years later, when this scrapbook surfaced.
There are some stories which we're not only an audience to, but may become their participants.
Nicky's story came out by accident after this scrapbook surfaced after gathering dust for decades. Once it did, though, it set about a whole chain of incredible events.
That's me before I left for England. But until 1988, I had no idea who had rescued me from all but certain death. It was this old man who had saved my life and that of hundreds of others in the Second World War. Yet for 50 years, we knew nothing about him, not even that he existed.
And as he says, 50 years later, the children who had been saved by Nicholas Winton learned about the identity of their rescuer and his story, round about the same time that I and millions of other TV viewers did when their story was told on the TV show That's Life. That's Life was a type of Saturday evening family show that I used to find a bit weird. They covered topics as wide-ranging as rude-shaped vegetables that resembled body parts, and viewers would actually send them in, ranging from funny songs and poems, and then covering really serious topics like child abuse. It was an odd mix, a really quirky show. But one Saturday, That's Life gave us one of the best moments I've ever seen on TV. I was old enough to know what the Holocaust was and what the implications would have been for the children had they not been rescued by Nicholas Winton. I think it was a very important story for me to see when young, when the seeds or weeds are being planted in our consciousness for good or for ill. This moment from the TV show That's Life has been viewed online by so many people around the world since then. But it was wonderful to have the privilege to see it when it first aired, when nobody knew what the story was about or what was going to happen next. And here it is again, remembering that the teaching from the course that we're focusing on is: a miracle is never lost. It may touch many people you have not even met and produce undreamed of changes in situations of which you are not even aware.
These children were brought over to England in 1939, that's 49 years ago, from Prague in Czechoslovakia. They were all in the gravest danger because they were Jewish, some of them orphans, their parents might have been arrested, or maybe their parents were just intellectuals or communists, the kind of people that Hitler really hated. If they hadn't been rescued and brought over to England, these children would have been killed by the Nazis. But in fact, they were saved by an English stockbroker called Nicholas Winton. In all, Nicholas Winton and the committees who helped him managed to save 664 children. This is his scrapbook. There are all kinds of fascinating pictures in it. If you look at the very back of this scrapbook, fascinating things in it, all the letters. But back here, you will see, is the list of all the children and the foster families who took them in. Mr. Winton told us,
"My greatest disappointment came in September that year, when 250 children were ready to come over. On the very day they were due to leave, war broke out. I can't imagine what became of those children."
and in fact there's a letter here in the scrapbook explaining that all the work regarding the bringing over of children into this country has had to be postponed until further notice, and that of course is because war broke out. I'll show you one of the things that struck us very touching. Here, if you just have a look here, you can see little composites of the pictures of the children as they were then. I don't know if you can see that. And here, if you look, there's their names, and this one here, it says placed. You see, there the children are. We asked Mr. Winton how he feels knowing so many people owe their lives to him. He said,
"I'm only disappointed I couldn't have saved more. So many lives could have been saved if people at the time had realised the urgency. It's heartbreaking."
but still his achievement is wonderful. Now, Mr. Winton himself has traced one of those children, Rudolf Vesely, who is with us here tonight. There he is. Good evening, Mr. Vesely.
Evening.
Lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
And we've actually managed to find 3 more. This is Vera Diamant when she was 10. Now she's Vera Gissing. Until we told her this week, she had no idea that Nicholas Winton had in fact arranged her rescue. But we did find her name, Vera Diamant, as she was then, on his list. So we told her about him. She said,
I tried very hard to find out who had rescued us. I even tried the Archbishop of Canterbury to see if he knew, but I drew a blank. I would very much like to meet Nicholas Winton, to thank him for saving my life. If it hadn't been for this man, I wouldn't be here to tell the tale.
Vera Gissing is with us here tonight. Hello, Vera. And I should tell you that you are actually sitting next to Nicholas Winton. Would you mind hanging on to your handkerchief, because we found 2 more of those children? One of them is called Hanush Schnabel. He was only 11 when he came over here. We have his passport with all the official stamps on it. I don't know if you can see. This is how he got out. He told us.
I don't know how my rescue was arranged. I had no idea when I left my parents at Prague Station that I would never see them again. My older brother was supposed to come here in September, but war broke out and I never saw him again either. I hoped all through the war that they would survive, but they were gassed in a concentration camp. I've often wondered who was responsible for organizing my rescue. I would dearly love to meet him and thank him for helping us children without any hope of acknowledgement.
Hanush's name is on Nicholas Winton's list. They call him Hans there, you see. Hanush is here tonight, so you too can thank Mr. Winton. We have one more story for you. Milena Fleischmann. She had to escape when she was 9 with her little sister because her father had helped the author Thomas Mann to escape, so he was on the Nazis' wanted list. She told us.
If it was Nicholas Winton who helped me to escape, my sister and my cousin with me, then I would be honoured to meet him, to thank him. If it were not for him, I would have gone the same way as my cousins, who both ended up in concentration camps.
Once again, Milena is on Nicholas's list. You see her there. But she is now Lady Milena Grenfell-Baines. And there she is. Milena, I believe you still have the name tag you wore around your neck when you arrived as a little girl at Liverpool.
I wore this around my neck. And this is the actual pass that we were given to come to England. And I'm another of the children that you saved. May I say that my mother is watching this evening. Yeah. She is 84 and she too was rescued and is in England and watching this programme this evening.
There you are, Mr. Winton. Well, a lot of memories brought back. I hope you now realise how grateful people are to you for what you've done. I know you don't want thanks, but I think you're certainly going to get them. Thank you so much for joining us. As many as possible of these grown-up children to get in touch with us, so they'd have the chance to thank Mr. Winton personally. Can I ask, is there anyone in our audience tonight who owes their life to Nicholas Winton? If so, could you stand up, please? Mr. Winton, would you like to turn round? You'll have the chance to meet these people properly after the programme. In the meantime, Mr. Winton, on behalf of all of them, thank you very much indeed.